In this video, we're going to talk about composite functions. A composite function is also known as composition of functions. It is a function that is constructed by combining two or more functions. It involves applying one function to the output of another function. A composite function is a fundamental concept in mathematics, most especially in calculus and algebra. We have several examples of composite function. Let's take a look at few of them in the video. If f of x equal to 3x minus 4 and g of x equal to x squared minus 3, the question is to compute f of g and g of f. How do we compute f of g? Another way of writing f of g is f of g of x. And the concept is pretty easy. All we need to do is to recognize f of x as given in the question, which is 3x minus 4. So we need to substitute g of x for the value of x in 3x minus 4. So it's just like writing 3 in a bracket g of x minus 4. So that gives us 3 in a bracket x squared minus 3 minus 4. So when you open the bracket, you obtain the answer, which is 3x squared minus x minus 4. And that leads us to the final answer to the question, which is 3x squared minus 13. The same thing is applicable to the next question, which is g of f. And another way of writing g of f is g of f of x. So the concept is to substitute f of x for the value of x in g of x. So we'll recognize g of x, which is x squared minus 3 as given in the question. So it's just like saying f of x squared minus 3. And what is f of x? F of x is 3x minus 4. So we have 3x minus 4 squared minus 3. So we multiply 3x minus 4 by itself, then we take away 3. So if you open the bracket, we have 9x squared minus 12 minus 12 plus 16 minus 3. And that gives us 9x squared minus 24 plus 16 minus 3. And our answer to that is 9x squared minus 24x plus 13. Let's take a look at another example. In this example, we are given f of x to be 5x plus 2 and our g of x to be x cubed minus 4. So the question is to compute f of g of 2 and then g of f of minus 1. You cannot compute f of g of 2 without computing f of g of x. So let's first of all go ahead and compute f of g of x. And what is f of g of x? We're going to be replacing g of x for the value of x in f of x. So the first thing we need to do is to recognize f of x. So from the question, I f of x equal to 5x plus 2. So if f of x is equal to 5x plus 2, then it's like putting g of x for the value of x in f of x. So it's like saying 5 in a bracket g of x plus 2. So if it is 5 bracket g of x and a g of x is x cubed minus 4, then we do have 5 in a bracket x cubed minus 4, then plus 2. So we need to open the bracket. Opening the bracket, we obtain 5x cubed minus 20 plus 22. And of course, that gives us 5x cubed minus 18. And then we can use the answer we got here to compute f of g of 2, which is equal to 5 in the bracket 2 cubed minus 18. And 2 cubed is 8. So that gives us 5 times 8 minus 18. And that is 40 minus 18. And that is 22. But there is another shorter way of getting this kind of question done. The other way is that in our f of g of x, we first of all remove g of x and we substitute 2 directly into our g of x. So in this case, we recognize g of x, which is x cubed minus 4. So let's substitute 2 directly into g of x. So we are putting 2 in place of x in our g of x. So which gives us 2 cubed minus 4. So our 2 cubed minus 4 is 8 minus 4, which is going to give us 4. And then we come back, our f of g of x has now become f of 4. So all we need to do is to recognize f of x from the question, which is 5x plus 2. So we just substitute 4 for the value of x in 5x plus 2. So that becomes 5 bracket 4 plus 2, which is going to give us 20 plus 2. And then our answer is 22. You can see that this method is a way shorter than the first method we used there. So everything about function or a composite function is all a matter of substitution. So it's a question of substituting one function into another function. Then let's take a look at the second question we have there. I would prefer we use the second method to solve our question number 2 for this set of functions we are given on the screen. So in this case, our g of f of minus 1. So don't forget the second method. We need to substitute minus 1 into f of x directly, and then we need to recognize f of x. F of x is equal to 5x plus 2, and then substituting 1 for the value of x directly into f of x, then we obtain 5 in a bracket minus 1 plus 2, and that gives us minus 5 plus 2, and then we obtain minus 3. And then we go back to write our g of f of x, which is g of f of minus 1, has become g of minus 3. So in that case, we recognize g of x, which is x cubed minus 4, and therefore we substitute minus 3 for the value of x in our g of x, and that becomes minus 3 cubed and then minus 3 cubed minus 4. So if it is minus 3 cubed minus 4, minus 3 cubed is going to give us a negative answer because the power is odd. So anytime you have an odd power, then your answer is going to be negative if your number is a negative value. And that gives us minus 27 minus 4. And of course, we do know that minus 27 minus 4 is equal to minus 31. Let's take a look at another example. I used another denotation here so that when you see this in an exam, we can easily recognize that it's still the same thing as writing the other denotations that I have actually used in our previous question. This one says if f such that x maps into 5 minus 2x is another way of saying f of x equal to 5 minus 2x. The same thing with g such that x maps into x squared minus 1 is also another way of saying g of x equal to x squared minus 1. And then the third function we have there is h of x, which is equal to 4x minus 3, which is also the same thing as saying h maps into x such that x maps into 4x minus 3. And then we have about 6 questions for us to compute on the screen. So let's compute them one after the other. The first question is f of g. Our f of g is equal to f of g of x. That's another way of writing it. Don't forget the concept. The technique is substituting g of x for the value of x in f of x if you have this kind of question. So it's just like saying we are putting the value of g of x for the value of x in f of x. So the first thing is to recognize our f of x from the question. Our f of x is 5 minus 2x. So it's just like writing 5 minus 2 in the bracket g of x. And then we bring in the value of g of x into the equation. And that becomes 5 minus 2 in the bracket x squared minus 1. Don't forget, our x squared minus 1 is the value of g of x from the question. And then we go ahead and open up the bracket. The bracket is 5 minus 2x squared and then plus 2. How do I obtain plus 2 there? Don't forget to carry the sign along when you are opening up the bracket. That's one of the mistakes that is quite common among students. Okay, so it has to be minus 2 times x squared, which is minus 2x squared, and then minus times minus first, which is positive 2, then 2 times 1 equal to 2. So we need to rearrange this, put all the constant terms together, and that becomes 5 plus 2 minus 2x squared, which is 7 minus 2x squared. That is the answer to f of g of x. Let's go ahead and see what our g of h will give us. In this case, our g of h can also be written as g of h of x. We use the same techniques. So composite is a function is like substituting, is all a matter of substituting one function into another set of function. So if we have g in the bracket h of x, so what we need to do here is to recognize our g of x from the question. Our g of x is x squared minus 1. So it's just like saying h of x squared minus 1, because that's what we need to do there. Okay, we are substituting h of x for the value of x in our g of x. And what is h of x from the question? Our h of x is x squared. Our g of x is x squared minus 1. And therefore, our h of x in this case is 4x minus 3 squared minus 1. And of course, we need to open up the bracket. Okay, opening up the bracket is 4x minus 3 multiplied by itself minus 1. And of course, if you open this, then we have 16x squared minus 12 minus 12x squared, and then minus 12x, then plus 9 minus 1. And then if you compute all of this together, we're going to have 16x squared minus 24x plus 8, because we have minus 12x is going to give us minus 24x, and of course 9 minus 1 equal to 8. That is the answer to second question. Let's try another question, and that's going to be a question 3 to all the functions we have on the screen. The third question there is f of h, and our f of h can also be written as f of h of x. Okay, so it's just like substituting h of x for the value of x in f of x, which is pretty easy. Our f of x has to be recognized first. Our f of x equal to 5 minus 2x. So if f of x equal to 5 minus 2x, and then it's just like writing 5 minus 2 in the bracket h of x. So that's it. We just need to substitute h of x for the value of x in 5 minus 2x. Okay, so from the question, our h of x is 4x minus 3. So we bring that into the equation. That becomes 5 minus 2 in the bracket 4x minus 3. So opening that bracket, don't forget the use of the sign as I pointed out in the previous example. That becomes 5 minus 2 times 4x is 8x. Then you have to use the negative sign to multiply the negative sign in the bracket. That becomes 5 minus 8x plus 6. And of course, the constant time arranged together, that becomes 5 plus 6 minus 8x. And then finally, we have 11 minus 8x. Let's get to C, the fourth question. The fourth question is g of f of h. In g of f of h, we have three functions here computed together. So we have calculated f of h, so we can just represent that to be g of f of h, and then we can recall our f of h in the previous calculation is 11 minus 8x. So if f of h is 11 minus 8x, then we can just substitute that into g of x. So g of x is x squared minus 1. So we are substituting f of h, which is 11 minus 8x, for the value of x in g of x. So our g of x is x squared minus 1, and this becomes 11 minus 8x squared, then minus 1. And then if you open the brackets, you multiply 11 minus 8x by itself, and then open up the brackets, you have 121 minus 88x minus 88x plus 64 x squared minus 1. You compute that, and then you get a final answer to be 64x squared minus 176x plus 120. And of course, the last two questions we have there, they are pretty easy, in the sense that we had computed in the first question we solved f of g. So if you are computing f of g of minus 3, it's just for you to substitute minus 3 for the value of x in f of g. And we will recall our f of g equal to 7 minus 2x squared. And then in that case, our f of g of minus 3 is going to give us 7 minus 2 in the bracket minus 3 squared. And of course, if you compute that together, you're going to have minus 11. And then the last question we have there is g of h of 5. Our g of h of 5 is just recalling our g of h as calculated in our previous steps taken. And that's going to be 16x squared minus 24x plus 8, which is our g of h. So we're going to substitute 5 for the value of x in our equation. And then substituting 5, that gives us 16 in the bracket 5x squared minus 24 in the bracket 5 plus 8. And that gives us 400 minus 120 and then plus 48. That's 5 squared there, which is 25 times 16 is 400. And then we have 288 as our final answer to that question. Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channels.